Hello, my name is Carter Fanning. I'm the communications officer for the Libertarian Party of Bexar County. Today we have Bailey Cole with us, who's the Libertarian candidate for U.S. House of Representatives, District 28. I want to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, yeah.
So if we want to get started, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I just recently graduated from Texas A&M with a Bachelor's of Science in History. I have been a libertarian for most of my college career, pretty much all of it. And really, I just have a passion for government, a passion for politics. It's been one of my interests going back even before high school. So
Okay, cool.
it's something that I am very passionate about and that I care a lot about.
Very nice. So you mentioned you were political at a very young age. I was as well. It took me years to kind of come to the Libertarian Party. My brother found it earlier, but how did you find libertarianism?
Well, both my parents are very conservative. I come from a Republican house.
Okay.
When I was in high school, I very much mirrored that. I figured out what my parents followed. I learned from them, kind of just everything that a child normally does.
Very common.
When I got to college, I slowly started working my way through various political commentators, political philosophers, and seeing how it works. And I slowly but surely made my way to libertarians, mostly just by being libertarian myself and following that path. Somebody says something about like, listen, if you're going to try drugs in your own house, you're not going to hurt anybody but yourself, then I feel like that should be their personal decision. And you're like, that makes sense. So you kind of keep going down that path, get closer and closer. It wasn't until I heard about the Mises Caucus and some of the more recent efforts in the Libertarian Party to try and reform it. That was always one of my biggest issues with libertarians prior to that, was just terrible leadership. And I like to refer to a lot of libertarians as ideological cannibals. They spend more time attacking each other than they do the people that are actually opposed to them. And so I really hoped that I could be a part of that and make that part better. And I did a lot of good work with that when I was in college at Aggies for Liberty, making sure we were relatively neutral in the libertarian front and trying to get everybody from all sides involved. And really, it's actually funny. I didn't find out until about 2 years after I was part of the Libertarian Party. My dad was like, yeah, when I was in college in the 1970s, I was a libertarian too. And I was like, hold up, what?
Yeah.
So that was one of those funny things is I just, learn from your parents even subconsciously.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's interesting that you have had, that path to libertarianism. I think that's very relatable for a lot of people. My path was quite similar. What encouraged you to go from that to running for office?
Part of it is my interest in politics. I do love the system. It's always been some of my favorite things ever. When I care about history, when I focus on history, is political history. I care about the accumulation and the game that people play to get power, how they use it, what their goals are at any point in time. And that kind of relates, that takes that politics side of me and relates it back to the history that I love a lot. And it allows me to learn from history what people are trying to do now. Going on from that, it's just a matter of, I see now people who care so much about accumulating power, keeping it, and doing everything they can to use their power to benefit themselves and not others. And so I look at the situation and say, if I can be the person that can take some of that power and use it to help everybody, use it to limit the power that everybody else has, then I should have the moral duty to do so.
That's very interesting. So when we're talking about national politics, which state or not state rep, U.S. House rep is definitely national politics. The national polling is really saying that there's two really key issues that are going to determine most races at the national level, and that is the economy. The economy is not the best, not the worst right now. It's a little shaky, and then immigration. So let's start with the economy first. What are your thoughts on the economy?
I think that a lot of times the government is out there. They make these regulations. They don't really think about how regulations in general affect businesses. I think right now we have a serious problem with overregulation. The more regulation that we place on businesses, the higher the barrier to entry becomes for people to start new ones. And really that is what drives the economy, is people investing in the world around them, starting a new business, hiring everybody that they can, and benefiting hundreds of thousands of people while they're at it. I think one of the places this is the most egregious is nuclear energy. It's virtually impossible to start a nuclear energy company nowadays. There's so much regulation that it's unlikely that you'll get one in 10 years. I mean, we've had one in the last 20 years at this point. And that's something that I think I care a lot about. I'm also an environmentalist in some capacity. I was a Boy Scout. I learned all of this stuff. I love hiking. I think natural parks are a great thing. And as a Christian, I believe that God put us on this world to be caretakers of it. And so if we fail to take care of the world that's around us, then we have failed that part of our purpose here on Earth. So to me, I look at nuclear energy as the best possible replacement for fossil fuels. It is zero emissions. It doesn't take up nearly the same amount of land that solar and wind does to produce the same amount of energy. It has very, very little nuclear waste. Actually, if you take all of the nuclear waste that's ever been produced in the US, going back to the 1950s, it can fit all on a football field stacked 15 feet high. And France recycles 96% of their nuclear waste. So think about what we could do and how little waste that would produce to power the nation. And to me, that's one thing that I think we should definitely cut back on, is a lot of those regulations barring people from starting new power plants. And it's not just that. This is the same effect across the entire economy, whether you're trying to start a restaurant, any sort of business.
That's a very good point about power. It ties perfectly into the economy because, utility bills are going up, etc. Let's pivot now to the border. We seem to be in the middle of quite an interesting debate on the border from the typical left and right. What does a libertarian solution at the border look like to you?
That is such a difficult question. I have heard libertarians fight amongst each other so much on this particular issue. That's going back to me calling a lot of libertarians ideological cannibals. They're more interested in fighting with each other about things like the border than about other issues that they all agree on. For me, I think that it's best if libertarians take a relatively simple approach. To me, I think that immigrants have built America. I think that throughout most of American history, there have been waves of mass immigration into the US, and then on the other side, there's people who they then cut down on it and become more isolationist for a few decades. You see this after the Irish potato famine. You see this in the early 1900s. It's a pretty common thing, and we're at one of those periods of really, really high immigration now. If history is anything to go by, that means that in the future, there's going to be a lot of people who manage to clamp down on immigration and we become a little bit more isolationist for a long period of time. I don't like that idea. I don't think that we should function on this reactionary, fighting back and forth, pendulum swinging sort of argument. I think that it's a good thing that we have immigration. I think it's a good thing to invite anybody who is willing to be American, pro-freedom, pro-liberty. Just those people make the world a better place. They make America a better place. What we shouldn't do is what we're doing right now. Letting everybody across the border, regardless of who they are, just saying like, oh, you've claimed asylum even though you're from like the opposite side of the world. Welcome to America from Mexico. That's not how asylum works. You need to stop in the closest safe nation. But on top of that, if we're not vetting these people, we could be endangering our own people. Terrorists could be coming across, and there's a lot of evidence that we've found terrorists coming across the border. I don't care how many people we let across, but we cannot let them in without knowing who they are. And so for me, I would like to establish some sort of security on the border to at least vet these people before letting them into the country and losing them. And frankly, to me, that is the safest possible option without completely overhauling the entire immigration system, which let's be honest, probably needs to happen.
Yeah.
And to me, that is the thing. If you look at the Constitution, the preamble specifically states 4 purposes of government, one of which is security. That is the primary function of government if we're going to have one. And to me, I think the immigration policy we have now is failing at that.
Yeah. I think most people would agree that what we have now is not ideal. But I do appreciate a libertarian take on the solution. So we've talked about 2 of the issues that mean a lot to the American people. Are there any issues that mean a lot to you personally at the national policy level?
For one, I think education is something that we really need to look at. Across the board, it is a state-run issue, but there is this national Department of Education that has not really helped anybody since it's been built. We need to take a look at that. To me, any agency, any department that exists should not just prove itself at the time, prove its own necessity at the time that it was created, but every single year after. And I'm looking at the Department of Education, and I don't think that they have been effective in what they were attempting to do. I don't think that they have any real goals now. I think that they just keep pushing relatively pointless, mostly, issues on states, and there's no real benefit to it. Personally, I just got out of college. I want to become a history teacher or professor in some capacity, whether that's at a historical site or at a university or even a high school. I want to see historical education especially be a bigger focus. I think that without the historical context of what America is and what we've done in the past, you can't properly look at politics and understand what it is, what people are trying to do, and even push through some lies that a lot of politicians like. I think that's incredibly important. I also think that, for example, COVID. COVID was incredibly damaging to everybody. I was in college during COVID. I was a sophomore when this entire thing happened. I spent the entirety of my junior year pretty much locked up in my apartment with nowhere to go. I missed out on a lot of science labs and practical experience in my first major, which was material science. And that really turned me off of even wanting that job, that field. And that's part of why I ended up switching majors.
Yeah.
To me, we hurt an entire generation of education because of the COVID lockdowns. If you look at the average age for death of COVID, it's about 65. Anybody under the age of 30 that was like a healthy weight was a 0 death toll. There was no risk to those people. But of course, the average age of a senator is 65, and the average age of a House of Representatives is 57.8. Of course they're scared. Of course they're going to pass laws that protect them. But in the process of doing so, they hurt an entire generation. Gen Z will never be the same because of how they missed out on education, because of how it affected them, because of the trauma that being locked away and isolated from social situations for a year will do. And to me, I think that that's something that we need to look at is how do we best make our future? And that is with our kids, that is with the younger generations. And we need to prepare them to eventually take over. That's part of why I'm here, is because I want to be that part of the generation that takes over eventually. And without that, without kids who are educated, who care about what they're doing, who care about their fields and they know their fields well, they can't do that. And to me, especially when it comes to education, COVID hit it harder than anything else. Because you can't get those years back, especially the younger you are. That's going to put you years behind.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about today?
I will say, going back to age, there are going to be a lot of people. I know I'm going to be turning 25 2 weeks before the November election.
Wow.
If I'm elected, I will be one of the youngest people to ever serve in the House of Representatives, and I'm aware of that. And that's something that I think that I want to talk about. A lot of people are going to look at that, they're going to say, he has no experience, he doesn't know what he's doing. You can think that, but the truth is, when it comes down to it, I've been in politics for over a decade at this point. I have cared about what's happening. I've paid attention to it. One of my earliest memories is the night that Barack Obama got elected. This is something that I really care about. And that's, to me, I've poured my life into it. I founded Aggies for Liberty when I was in college. And that was something that we built from scratch. My one goal with that was to make it last longer than me. And I did that. There's great guys who took over and are now running that organization, and I am proud of them for it. I helped run a decriminalization campaign when I was in college, and that's something that I am very proud of. But when it comes down to it, I still have never been in the House of Representatives. That's something that would be, to me, that would be terrifying, stepping into that for the first time, not really having an idea of what's going on. But when I look at it, I look at a ton of people who have no idea what my generation is afraid of. They have no idea what my generation worries about. They worry about themselves. They worry about the people who vote for them, which are largely people in their 50s and 60s. And I want to be there for my generation. I want to be there to help build the future that we have to live in. These people that are in Congress right now, they don't have to live in it. They'll be gone by the time that I get to my 40s, and I'm looking around the world and trying to figure out what I have to deal with. And that is part of why I care so much about what happens here. I want to live in a future that I am proud of, that I care about, and that's good for me and my kids, my future kids that I don't have yet. And I can't do that if I'm looking at a ton of 60-year-olds who are thinking about themselves, who are thinking, what can I get out of the next 20 years? Screw whatever happens to these people after I'm gone.
Well, I appreciate your time today. Like I said before, I very much look forward to working with you on your campaign.
Absolutely.